Welcome to the Chris Heimerdinger Channel. I'm so glad to be back. Please subscribe, like, comment, join us on Patreon. I confess, take a short break so that I could finish revisions on my latest novel, Shadows of Absorka. Got it to the point where I can now record the full audiobook. But I'm back now. This episode is about celebrating, mostly. I'm definitely excited about being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This church, the Restored Gospel, is flourishing. We're growing like gangbusters, unprecedented growth. At the same time, this episode is a bit of a reality check. And some of the things that I talk about might be surprising, even alarming, to the average Latter-day Saint who goes about their lives, nurturing their families, serving in communities. But really, they don't get caught up in the minutia of worldwide religious affairs. But like me, listen to General Conference, take in the news and the statistics reported by apostles and others, and sort of leave it at that. I know that a lot of the info that I'm about to report, I didn't know before I started researching this podcast. And I sort of pride myself, on being aware of world affairs and politics, but I didn't have a clue about some of these things, the things that I'm about to divulge. I was so excited, thrilled during the most recent General Conference when one of our apostles, Elder Cook, reported,
in the last 36 months, nearly 900,000 converts have joined the church. These converts constitute approximately 5% of the total church membership.
Did you get that? A 5% increase in total church membership in 3 years. What? I mean, that's shocking. For the past 2 decades, haven't we been hearing how church membership is shrinking or stagnant, it's just not growing at all? In April of 1982, a little more than 40 years ago, the church announced that it had crossed the 5 million member mark. That 5 millionth member, by the way, that was me. See, this tidbit was reported just 4 months after I joined the church, December of 1981. So you know how it takes statistics a couple months to catch up and go public, right? So the 5 millionth member, yeah, maybe I should take a bow. Okay, I got to confess, there was actually that one convert in Bolivia. Some claim that guy was immersed in the water 1 millionth of a second sooner. But I object. If you watch the ticker tape, the eternal ticker tape that gets stored in heaven,
watch it in really, really, really slow motion.
I think it's clear that I was immersed first. So that's me, church member 5 million. Okay, I'm kidding. And frankly, it doesn't matter because it wasn't long before that milestone got dusted, left in the dust. Because just 15 years later, in November 1997, we reached 10 million members. Let that sink in. 15 years after we crossed the 5 million mark, church membership doubled. But honestly, that's not particularly unusual. Church membership has basically been doubling every 15 years since 1947. That stat is remarkably consistent. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been doubling in membership every 15 years, almost like clockwork, since 1947. That is, until 2012. Pattern disrupted. We did not cross the 20 million member mark in 2012, as might have been predicted by the growth patterns of the church ever since the end of World War II. You want to put it in corporate terms, we missed the target. Oh, and don't think the world didn't notice. Enemies of the church were pleased as punch to report that the Mormon church was finally grinding to a halt. Not really. Annual growth has never really been less than 1%. But the decline compared to prior decades was impossible to ignore. Why? Well, theories abound, but a couple of things seem obvious enough to me. Two things happened in the intervening years between 1997 and 2012. I mean, there's a lot more than just two things, but to me, two things really stand out. One, the explosion of the internet. Two, the massive rise, at least in the West, of that thing that has come to be known as woke culture. As far as the internet, it's obvious that when it came to posting and putting online all that anti-Mormon stuff, posting all the answers to those various issues and questions, I mean, we were definitely behind the eight ball. I think things are more or less evened out now. For those who seek it, every criticism has an answer. But for a long time, I mean, sheesh, a decade, maybe longer, it was not even. The antis clearly beat us to the punch. But for younger generations, especially, I'm not even sure that that's a problem now. Folks who grew up with the internet, it turns out, are the least likely to trust the internet. What? You mean all that stuff they told me about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Wasn't all that accurate? There are sensible explanations. Yep, they're out there. And it doesn't take long to find them if you sincerely want to know. The woke culture thing may have contributed to a stagnation in growth in a different way. First, woke culture gets defined in different ways. It essentially means the cancellation, doxing, of any culture, demographic, or individual who, real or perceived, is not in line with the program when it comes to enthusiastically supporting social movements, identities, generally viewed as marginalized in the West and often throughout the world since time memorial. Here's some marginalized categories. I mean, everybody knows these, but I'll list them anyway. Gay versus straight. In fact, everyone who self-identifies as straight versus the entire LGBTQ plus communities. And then there's the time memorial categories, white versus black and brown. Simply put, at least in the West, that means European versus just about everyone else. And then the other categories, 3, men versus women. 4, poor versus rich, which directly relates to non-educated versus educated, or blue collar versus white collar, whatever. Number 5, non-Christians or irreligious, which includes atheists and agnostics, versus Christian or religious. That's a loaded term, traditional, but we won't get into that for now. 6, the political divide, liberal progressives versus conservative. Also a bit simplistic to put it that way, but you get what I mean. All of these categories, admittedly, are way generalized. Frequently, there's a lot of crossover from one to another. And I'm going to overgeneralize even further by saying that the first group in each of these 6 competing identities is considerably less religious than the second group, with the possible exception of men versus women. When it comes to faith, women are they're more religious. However, we're mostly talking about older women. When it comes to younger women, men and women are pretty equal in their irreligiosity. And under 30, irreligious women are starting to outnumber irreligious men. Where do I get all this information? Well, mostly from AI. Different AIs. That's important because sometimes the stats from one AI are very different from another AI. But a lot of this doesn't require AI. I mean, it's just common sense. It's observation. Generally speaking, it seems clear that religiosity has been on the outs in Western cultures since the 90s. But it seems to be experiencing somewhat of a resurgence over the past decade, especially since COVID. Christianity is experiencing a dramatic resurgence, especially in non-Western cultures like Africa, Asia, Latin America, India, the Philippines, etc. However, Islam has also expanded over that same time period. Islam is technically the fastest growing religion in the world, but that's almost entirely due to population expansion, not conversion. In short, Muslims are having more babies. However, Christianity is also experiencing a resurgence, and this is due to proselyting and conversion. I mean, it's definitely due to proselyting and conversion. Not in traditional Christian countries, though. Not in places like Europe and the Western Hemisphere. Why? Because traditional Christian countries, they aren't having babies. I mean, this is a terrible trend, but it encompasses Europe, North America, South America. Huh? You mean Latin American countries? Traditionally Catholic, they are no longer having children? No, they are not. And this was news to me. See, in order for a population to just replace itself, it needs a 2.1 replacement population per person, of children per person. Since 2014, Latin America as a whole has dropped below that number. The average today is 1.8. Not quite as bad as the US, which is 1.6, and not quite as bad as Canada, which is 1.2. I mean, that's right. The Western Hemisphere as a whole is a shrinking population. Oh, thank heaven for birth control pills and abortions, right? I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms, and I don't want to get into it. Europe is about 1.4 replacement right now. My point is that these countries represent the bastion of Western civilization, which is, like it or not, Christian by its very definition. So, if Christianity, including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is experiencing exponential growth over the past few years, what accounts for that? In a word, Africa. Oh, it's not just Africa. It's India, it's the Philippines, New Guinea. There are other parts of the world where Christianity is also experiencing exponential growth, especially since the pandemic. But the biggest player is Africa. Of that 900,000 convert baptisms reported by Elder Cook in the October General Conference, about 400,000 of those, or roughly 45%, are from Africa. Yes, we've had success in other parts of the world, and Elder Cook also said this.
In the first 6 months of this year, conversions have risen by more than 20% over the previous year in Europe, Africa, Asia, the Pacific, and Latin America. In North America, we have seen a 17% increase.
So there's been a healthy uptick in North America and other regions that were experiencing previously kind of a drought in convert baptisms. But still, it's Africa, baby. That's where it's at. And the vast majority of these converts are Black. Now, that might seem very peculiar considering that prior to 1978, Blacks in our church couldn't receive the priesthood or enjoy the full blessings of the temple. This issue continues to be shoved down the throats of North American members of the church by its enemies as a primary argument as to why the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints couldn't possibly be true. How could we have espoused such a racist doctrine for almost 150 years and still claim to be the only true Church of Jesus Christ on the face of the earth, in which the Lord is well pleased? Speaking of the church collectively and not individually, to paraphrase what it states in Doctrine and Covenants, section 1. A cynic or an anti-Latter-day Saint might say, all these poor third world uneducated countries where the church is experiencing such exponential growth, they don't know about this former prohibition that was so racist. If they did, they'd steer clear. Totally wrong. You think the adversary and competing Christian denominations would let that go? African converts to the restored gospel are perfectly aware of this issue. And if anyone thought it was fuzzy, in October, Elder Peter M. Johnson of the 70 reminded everyone.
Early in my missionary service, I learned that there was a period that those of Black African descent were not allowed to enjoy all of the blessings of worshiping in the house of the Lord. Learning this for the first time brought feelings of anger, confusion, doubt, and fear.
I should probably play through those parts of the talk where he explains how he personally overcame this issue. But I'll leave that to the listener to search that up. The question is, how is this even possible? Such an apparent black mark on the history and doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ. And yet, if trends continue before the end of this decade, 10%, 1 in 10 of every member of our church will be black. It's already about 1 in 20. One might think that this reality doesn't make any logical sense. How can the intellect of any convert, especially African converts, wrap itself around such a stain? Well, that's easy. Intellect, it doesn't have anything to do with it. The Holy Ghost gets all credit, the Spirit of Christ. And that Spirit transcends all that intellect nonsense. So, without a doubt, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have much to celebrate, much for which we can rejoice. The work of God, just as Joseph Smith predicted, is covering the earth, penetrating every clime, sounding in every ear. Okay, now I'm going to throw some ice water on all this. That's probably not a very good term. It's not a great analogy. It's not ice water. It's not bad news, but it is a reality check because it's always good to have the proper bearings, and truth is truth. We should never fear the truth. We learn from it. We take from it. We reorient where necessary and become better off for it. So here's the facts. Among the denominations of Christianity that openly proselyte, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has one of the lowest conversion rates on the African continent compared to other denominations, maybe the lowest. Even Jehovah's Witnesses over the past 3 years have had more success in overall conversions than Latter-day Saints. The difference isn't that much, but Grok, ChatGPT, and Gemini all agree that Christian convert baptisms for Latter-day Saints rank near the bottom. Surprised? Well, wait a second before you fully assimilate those numbers, because there's a lot of caveats, and I'm going to get into them. Now, these numbers are estimates, and they're subject to revision, but during the same time period highlighted by Elder Cook, meaning 36 months prior to the October General Conference, Latter-day Saints, as I stated, report about 400,000 baptisms in Africa. Jehovah's Witnesses, about 500,000 baptisms. Seventh-Day Adventists, or SDA, that's the term I'm going to use, added 1.5 million to 2 million new members to their rolls, or about 7 or 8 times as many converts as Latter-day Saints over the same time period. Now, this stat is interesting to me because when I served a mission in the early to mid-1980s, our church membership outnumbered Seventh-day Adventists rather substantially by several million. Now, those tables have turned. The SDA church has about 23 million members compared to about 18 for Latter-day Saints. I had some direct experience with Seventh-day Adventists on my mission in Florida and Georgia. Long conversations with one of their pastors, I think, in Thomasville, Georgia. And I have even attended one of their church meetings in Stark, Florida, because we had a Seventh-day Adventist investigator. I was reasonably impressed. I mean, they knew their stuff, very educated on the scriptural and doctrinal perspectives that defines their particular Christian worldview. And their church meeting, compared to an LDS sacrament meeting of that day and still today, much, much more peaceful and tranquil. Kids weren't climbing all over the pews. No disruptions or crying. I think this was because they had an enclosed vestibule behind the chapel with soundproof glass where mothers wrangled children. I've seen a few LDS meeting houses with the same thing, like the Tabernacle on Temple Square. They also had a similar design in my stake center in Cody, Wyoming. But this is an old meeting house design, and as we all know, such designs are no longer standard for our chapels. Anyway, I respected Seventh-day Adventists. Still, as I was studying the numbers, for this podcast, I was curious, when exactly did the SDA membership surpass LDS membership worldwide? The answer? About 1998. And as far as Africa, like I say, The conversion rate over the past 3 years, 7 to 8 times higher than ours. Still, that is nothing compared to Africans who joined Pentecostal churches during the same period. Pentecostals include Holiness, Assemblies of God, a dozen or so more organizations. The number of Pentecostal conversions over the past 3 years, about 30 million. So let's face it, Africa itself is ripe for Christianity. The people are so humble, so curious and teachable, so hungry for the basic spiritual message of Jesus Christ. And it's sincere. It's not because they're poor or gullible or uneducated. They are sincerely hungry and open to Christ's teachings. And just about every Christian denomination that actively proselytes has experienced exponential growth. But how come, in the whole spectrum of things, conversions in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints seem to be lagging? Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-Day Adventists, outpacing Latter-day Saints? Really? That might reveal my age a little bit. I think it reflects my generation more than younger generations. I mean, that was my experience as a missionary. We were kind of competitive with those guys. Now we get to the caveats. And some of these are important and complicated. See, members of the restored church think of conversions and baptisms as the same thing. If there were 400,000 conversions in Africa, it means there were 400,000 baptisms. Not so with other Christian denominations that actively proselyte. I have to make that distinction, actively proselyte, because many Christian denominations like Catholics and Methodists and Orthodox do not actively proselyte. And it shows because those denominations are actually shrinking in numbers, Africa included. I mean, it hardly matters, even in Africa. Roman Catholics, for example, still added 30 million members to their rolls over the past 3 years. And that's because, unlike Europe and North and South America, African birth rates are not underwater. Their populations are still very much expanding. Africa has some of the highest birth rates in the world, maybe the highest. Nevertheless, Christian denominations that actively proselyte are making a dent in traditional non-proselyting denominations. But as I say, many of these denominations that proselyte do not require rebaptism. Exceptions? Latter-day Saints and Jehovah's Witnesses. They require rebaptism. Seventh-day Adventists? Not so much. Well, unless you weren't baptized by immersion. Seventh-day Adventists are pretty particular about rebaptism if the original wasn't by immersion. But depending upon the region or the leaders, many Adventist congregations don't really care. So if a Latter-day Saint in the Congo wants to convert to SDA, no need for rebaptism. Latter-day Saints baptized you by immersion, so no need. Sometimes, like SDA, they become particular about baptism by immersion, and sometimes, if a pastor believes you were baptized in a non-Trinitarian church, that is a church that doesn't believe in the 3-in-1, 1-in-3 Godhead, that doctrine might be considered disqualifying for local leaders and prompt rebaptism. But for the most part, it's just not an issue. Yes, baptism is a gateway for all of them. It's a doctrine, but they just don't look at the issue the same way as Latter-day Saints or as Jehovah's Witnesses. So caveats like that obviously can make some total conversion numbers seem a little spongy, fungible, open to interpretation. And here's a strange concept. And you hear this from just about every missionary who comes home from Africa. In particular, my newest son-in-law who served in Ghana. Church swapping, trading out one Christian church for another is so commonplace that it makes it really impossible to rely on any conversion numbers beyond the ones reported by Latter-day Saints or Jehovah's Witnesses. And even those churches are challenged by this. Whole families and even village tribes might switch churches in search of spiritual revitalization, miracles, and healings financial blessings, or simply because, like in America, they like one pastor or service more than another. Friends, associates, family pressure, all the same factors. But in particular, churches that do not insist on rebaptism have extremely unreliable conversion numbers. Cumulative conversion numbers from Pentecostal churches might be counting the same 30 million converts, the same individuals, 5 or 6 times, or even more. SDA, same challenge. This makes keeping track of actual conversions for many denominations very messy. So even if that 30 million convert number for Pentecostals over the past 3 years is, say, 10 million members, and even if SDA accessions rates, I mean, most churches call it accessions instead of conversions, since formal ordinances like baptism may not be required. But even if the accession rate for SDA is only 1 million over 3 years instead of 2 million, these other denominations are still wiping the floor with us, kicking our butts. Why? I mean, why are these denominations seemingly so much more attractive than becoming a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? A number of reasons. These reasons are important. Tithing might be the biggest. The LDS demand that every convert from the beginning must pay 1/10 of their earnings to consider themselves a true and genuine convert. Seventh-Day Adventists also teach the doctrine of tithing. But generally, they don't teach this until after someone is already converted. The doctrine is taught, but not pressed. I mean, not like it is for Latter-day Saints. In fact, competing denominations, sometimes they'll use that strict doctrine of teaching tithing against us because Latter-day Saints act so obsessed with money and tithing. The Book of Mormon is commonly referred to as the Book of Mammon. And they're not wrong about the seriousness. I mean, just like we are here at home. Other churches, sometimes they think our bishops are like looking over our shoulders, studying our bank accounts. No, it's always just a matter of conscience and honesty. Still, LDS investigators over all the world are clearly taught before baptism that the highest blessings of the church are found in the temple. And to be temple worthy, to get a temple recommend, you got to pay a full tithing. African converts are wonderful. They don't want to be duplicitous. They sincerely want to be faithful members of whatever Christian church they join. And tithing for many is just a bridge too far. Another big deterrent for Africans is, well, our sacrament meetings are sort of bland compared to other denominations that actively proselyte. Jehovah's Witnesses, Adventists, Pentecostals go to a much greater effort to assimilate African folk culture into their services. Drums, traditional songs, chanting, loud music, dancing. And this is a concert, man. It's a party. LDS sacrament meetings, kind of lame by comparison. Pentecostal congregations in the United States are also kind of loud and colorful, but in Africa, that's what they want. Culturally, it just makes sense. Missionaries tell me that local wards and stakes also like to sponsor these kind of traditional folk events, even in LDS chapels, but on days other than Sunday. Sacrament meetings in Africa strive to be just as low-key and reverent in Africa as they do everywhere else. So, other proselyting denominations definitely have that advantage. Another advantage, polygamy. In some African nations, as much as 40% of the population practices polygamy. Not just Muslims. I mean, it's also prevalent among Christians and practitioners of traditional folk religions. It's just part of their culture, and it has been for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. LDS, SDA, and JW, all of these demand that converts cease this practice before they can join. Still, levels of insistence vary. For Adventists, for example, you can keep the wives, but you can only have conjugal relations with the first one. For Pentecostals, if polygamous marriage was part of that person's life pre-conversion, it's generally tolerated. Just don't marry additional wives. And it's much the same attitude for converts to traditional Protestant denominations like Lutherans, Methodists, Anglicans. Keep practicing. We don't like it, but just don't marry more wives. However, there's a lot of denominations now, generally the Pentecostal ones, whose headquarters are generally not in the United States or some other part of the world. They have headquarters in Africa. For them, polygamy, no problem. Can't help but compare such attitudes with how some of these same denominations treated Latter-day Saints who practiced polygamy in the 19th century with zero tolerance at the point of a gun. Whatever, different times, water under the bridge. The point is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is very strict about who can be baptized. We're looking for sincere conversion. I mean, everybody is looking for that. Latter-day Saints just have a lot more boxes that they have to check. And we always haven't had those boxes. You know, let's admit, in Latin America, we were guilty of baptizing many families willy-nilly, whose nearest chapel might have been 10 or 12 hours away or further. And we lagged in leadership training. As a result, our retention rates suffered. Well, our retention rates seem to be much better in Africa. It seems like in Africa, as well as other places where the church is growing, we have a better handle on how this conversion thing ought to be done. Thus, our retention has markedly improved. Sometimes 10 to 15% better retention than other denominations who actively proselyte. But the sources that you go to, they kind of argue about that, so I can't be certain. Still, the fact that other proselyting denominations are converting so many more people, I mean, it's humbling. These same competing denominations, they're also cleaning our clocks in places like India and New Guinea. I mean, if you want to talk about sheer numbers, that's okay. This is a long game, right? We're not competing with other churches, except when our carnal competitive natures tell us that we are. And we don't measure success in conversion stats, except when our carnal natures tell us otherwise. Here's one possible silver lining. Places like the United States, Canada, and Europe have also experienced a 20% membership expansion over the past year, while some other door-to-door competitors like Jehovah's Witnesses and Seventh-Day Adventists have pretty much flatlined in those same regions. No significant growth in America, Canada, or Europe. Latter-day Saints, 20% growth. My first thought was, well, that's interesting. Essentially, in the burnt-over districts of the world, where missionaries from all of these proselyting denominations have been active and going door-to-door for decades, the restored Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the only one showing significant growth. But there's another caveat, and get this. About 40% of those LDS converts in North America, Canada, and Europe are immigrant converts. That's right. This massive influx of immigrants in these countries as a result of things like Biden's open door policy have also led to a substantial spike in LDS convert baptisms. The reason? I mean, this might make some people kind of angry. The church's policy when it comes to teaching immigrants, when it comes to immigration status, is don't ask, don't tell. Missionaries don't ask if someone is here legally or illegally. They just spread the gospel. Now, admittedly, my own knee-jerk response to this fact was, kind of judgy, kind of cold. Shouldn't a person's legal status be a factor as to whether an investigator is baptized? Obey the laws of the land and all that stuff? Nope, not a factor in our missionary efforts. Not here, not in Europe, not anywhere in the world. Don't ask, don't tell. Now, because this is the church's policy and because I generally trust my church, okay, I can re-examine the arguments. Yes, I can see how the status of someone's immortal soul does trump someone's status as documented or undocumented. However, does that mean I am still allowed to feel that if a person, even after joining the church, gets swept up in an ICE raid, is that okay too? Maybe. Now, I don't want to get families split up, obviously, but it's still an issue that the individual has to address. I mean, you got to pay the piper. You got to get this issue straightened out. And then there's, the other thing that's important, and this is the fact that many politicians say our primary concern is we want to get rid of gang members, drug dealers, cartels, Tren de Aragua, MS-13. Is it possible that some who join the LDS faith are actually in the category of good migrants? Migrants who we might actually want in our country? Well, I'm sure there's exceptions, maybe some small minority, I'm sure, but some criminals who might join our church as a front, or maybe they work in some rationalization like, well, I sell drugs, but I don't take them. And how else am I going to support my family? I doubt there's a lot of these. There is such a thing as desirable immigrants. So I'm just going to hope that most converts of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints safely fit into that category. I'm not going to question church policy here. Call me a drone. Call me a shill. The point is, I see my church's point. My question is this: why aren't Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses experiencing a similar conversion success, the same kind of success as Latter-day Saints in the U.S., Canada, and Europe when it comes to immigrants? Aren't they taking advantage of this massive influx of migrants over the last 4 years? No, they aren't. And I can't really explain that, except to say this: the whole secret to the conversion of Seventh-Day Adventists and JWs in the third world is by integrating local cultural activities, music, clapping, dancing, into their third world worship services. These denominations are just seemingly not as interested in doing that in regions of the world where their congregations are already established. In America, for example, SDA investigators attend services in already existing facilities alongside longtime church members who are, for the most part, white and aging. Aging Adventists and J-dubs apparently aren't so keen on the idea of supporting dramatic cultural influx of African drums and Latin music that immigrant proselytes enjoy. Not so willing to switch things up so these culturally diverse groups feel more at home. Nope, we'll let the Latter-day Saints convert those immigrants. Leave all those crazy cultural things that presently infect and dominate Adventist and JW services in Africa and other third world countries. Stay over there. Let those guys do their thing, and we will keep doing ours. Because LDS worship services are basically uniform. I mean, the same all over the world. We don't experience the kind of pushback to change our ways to be culturally accommodating. Adventists and J-dubs in Canada and Europe pretty much feel the same. Oh, they're proselyting, but just join our church services exactly as they are, and please leave all that crazy cultural stuff outside. Please assimilate to our way of conducting worship services. That's the best way that I can explain it. And, I'm not really sure if that's accurate. If you want to educate me, leave a comment, because I'd love to understand it. You Adventists and JWs, you're definitely eating our lunch when it comes to convert baptisms in the third world. However, in these burnt over areas of the world, with long established congregations and churches, Latter-day Saints are eating your lunch, buds. As far as Pentecostals in the U.S., Canada, and Europe, they're doing better than Adventists and J-dubs, but new converts over the past 3 years are only about half of what the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ, has been experiencing. Seems like stodgy, sophisticated, stiff, boring white populations in these parts of the world just aren't as into Pentecostal styles of worship as third world countries. Another factor that limits the growth of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in places like Africa is our insistence, our utterly entrenched practice that every major decision comes from Salt Lake. Every penny of tithing is sent to church headquarters, accounted for, and then redistributed. Salt Lake, Salt Lake, Salt Lake. Whereas other denominations are totally fine, letting third world congregations govern themselves and govern their own finances. No bureaucracy, no waiting. Just send the headquarters that are in America or other countries, just send us 3 to 15% of your tithes or whatever hits your collection plates, and the rest is up to you. I can certainly see the advantage of this, but the practical consequence, obviously, there's going to be a hit. Latter-day Saints, on the flip side, do everything in their power to keep matters of doctrine consistent across the board throughout the world. That's just how it's going to be. And I respect that determination. If we are indeed the true and authorized gospel of Jesus Christ on the face of the earth, consistent top-down leadership is the only way, or at least it's the best way to do it. I mean, we still have to stamp out occasional fires of false doctrine from time to time, but top-down leadership, the prophet, the apostles, the 70s, the area authorities, it all works pretty well. And I would expect it to stay that way. So no problem. 900,000 convert baptisms in 36 months. That's great stuff, especially if such converts can be retained. The different AIs, they're all over the map when it comes to reporting retention rates for various Christian denominations, especially in the third world. Some say it's higher for the LDS than other proselyting churches. Some say lower. This is a number, obviously, that a lot of churches might be tempted to inflate. So accurate numbers might take a little more time. Keep praying for our missionaries. Keep praying for our members. Keep putting the names of our missionaries and the missionaries in general on our temple rolls. Take nothing for granted. Frankly, the only number that matters when the Savior returns is how many of us are truly prepared for that event, and how many will be trying to climb under a rock or wishing that a mountain might cover them over. It's your own salvation and that of your loved ones, those closest to you, that matter most. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you don't feel as close to the Lord today as you did yesterday, who moved? Please like, comment, subscribe, and if you have the means, support us on Patreon. This is the Chris Heimerdinger Channel. See you next time.